Will the ban on the PFI now lead to an end to the subversive activities that this organization is alleged to have carried out, or will, like the Simi, the PFI find some other way of keeping its nefarious designs going? Joining me on this broadcast, Aman Lekhi, senior advocate in the Supreme Court. We've got Dr. Shoaib Alam Jamai, chairperson of the India Muslim Foundation. Sushant Savin is a leading strategic affairs expert. Karuna Nandi is an advocate in the Supreme Court. We've got Dr. Vikram Singh, former IPS officer, joining us. Adil Singh Boparai represents the Congress. The BJP said because this matter is currently being looked at by the investigating agencies, they didn't want to send a representative to this conversation. I want to go across to Aman Lekhi first. On the basis of the evidence in the public domain at this moment, do you think the case and the ban against the PFI will hold in a court of law if and when the PFI decides to challenge it before the courts or one of the tribunals?
No, absolutely. This is absolutely justified. In fact, it's delayed. If you look at the conditions on which it will be banned, the criteria which the statute specifies is comprehensively satisfied. This falls in the category of unlawful activity, and in addition, it clearly attracts under 3A. As far as PFA is concerned, it's crime-ridden past, blood-soaked activities, which deal not only with extremism, as is apparent in the manifesto of making India an Islamic state, altering the fundamentals on which our polity is based, but apart from whatever the political commentary which is part of this program, the affidavits have been filed in the court, the orders have been passed in various courts, the investigation which has been revealed across the country, not just in Kerala, even in Bihar, justify this particular action. And why I say it's justified also because prior to this particular ban, there have been individual actions against particular persons under the Unlawful Activities Act. And because the individual actions against particular person, Unlawful Activities Act did not yield the result, and in fact the activities persisted, in that event those who actually constitute the body, which in fact endorses these particular actions, invited itself to this particular action of its being declared an unlawful organization, subject of course to the tribunal which is to be constituted affirming it. In my opinion, this is a warranted exercise within the limits of law and justified on all parameters.
Karuna Nandi, within the limits of law, belated, says Aman Lekhi, and they've got a crime-ridden past and therefore the PFI ought to have been banned and it's about time. Do you agree, or do you think that you should have looked at the difference between alleged acts committed by individuals versus institutional culpability?
Obviously, one thinks the latter, that you have to establish the institutional culpability before you ban the organization. And what appears to be happening is that even as Mr. Lekhi just said, that what's happening is that their investigation as per themselves the individual that there is more. But if there is more, then let us see what is more before the organization is banned. However, at the same time, if the allegations of the government are all taken to be true, and that's mostly what's being reported and reproduced wholesale, then of course the organization would need to be banned. I think the job for the tribunal and then the courts will be to look beyond what is happening, to look beyond what the government is saying, and look at the particular stage of the investigation and look at the evidence that's there right now, right? And see whether it justifies the ban now, right? And I think that's important. But somebody said that you're giving a crocin for a cancer. You're treating a headache when there is in fact a cancer. And there are different kinds of extremism in this country. One kind is somewhat addressed, which is not Islamic, I beg your pardon, Islamist terror in the name of a particular religion. But what is not addressed, in my view, adequately, and there is a real problem here, is terror by the Bajrang Dal. Is when you have Pragya, who is a political representative, and those cases are still going on against her. where you have public prosecutors, eminent public prosecutors saying that they were changed, where you have, somebody called Yashwant Shinde has filed a very detailed affidavit saying that implicating senior members of the Sangh Parivar. And I think those issues are not adequately addressed. And while the PFI has to be looked at its own merits, and the ban may very well be sustainable, and that's important, it's to leave the rest of it is a problem.
Vikram Singh, the critical question is, will this ban lead to an end to the subversive activities of the PFI? We saw in the case of Simi, after they were banned, names were changed, new organizations came up, and the same caste of individuals found a new manner of keeping their disruptive activities going. How do we ensure that this ban is the beginning of the end of the PFI?
This is one problem, Rahulji, that will have to be addressed and fixed immediately. We have seen the banning of Simi in the year 2001. It was an unmitigated disaster. Banned again subsequently in the year 2007. Adequate precautions taken, but reinvented himself as the Indian Mujahideen. Indian Mujahideen band and the Ansars, who are the die-hard stalwarts of Simi, they migrate to the PFI. You very rightly mentioned, but these arrests of 106 on the 22nd and 250 on the 27th, well, I do hope that the new Identification of Prisoners Act, which did not happen in the case of Simi, would take the biometrics, Aadhaar card, PAN card, mobile numbers and other details and open a foolproof digital history sheet so as that these people cannot change their names, reinvent themselves and migrate to a different platform, because that has to be a certain. I think it will be the height of optimism to presume that banning will address the issue totally. I would be the happiest person to believe, but this is not going to happen. Banning is something very simple. That is an administrative order duly approved by the tribunal, section 234 of the UAPA. But the first step only has been covered, and the nation has to go miles before anyone goes off to sleep, because the real work has begun now to identify every cohort, every sleeper cell, every member of the organization, every rupee. As they say, 250 crores were brought up in Bangalore through crowdfunding and through Hawala channels, cryptocurrency and the deep web and whatnot. Well, identifying that and going a bit of reverse engineering is some task. But Rahulji, I feel that now we have the task and the talent also to identify and work it out. But yes.
But how do you respond to the charge by Karuna Nandi that the action is one-sided? While you've gone after the PFI, which is well and good if their members are involved in anti-national activities, there are elements in the Bajrang Dal and some of the other right-wing organizations which have dubious roles in various cases which are being investigated by the courts, and the courts have found prima facie evidence. Those cases don't seem to be taken quite as seriously.
Karunaji and Lekhiji are illustrious advocates, and I learn from them, from their wisdom, from what they speak. But let me tell you, for the police and the law enforcement agencies, you give the opportunity, there's equality before law. We do not distinguish between Hindus and Muslims. We do not distinguish any person who's transgressed the rule of law. I learned from Mr. Lekhi and Karunaji that IPC does not say Hindu, Muslim, Bajrang Dal, PFI or there. One who transgresses the rule of law is taken to task by the law enforcement agencies. Ms. Nandi has a point there that perhaps is somebody in the back burner? Is there some kind of a warped priority in the way in which investigation can? I don't think it is possible in today's times. There are brilliant advocates like Karunaji who will tear the police defense into shreds in no time. There are brilliant advocates sitting in Delhi, Lucknow and Madhya Pradesh that any such miscarriage of justice will not go by default. It cannot. We are not living in the Victorian era. We are living in an age where IT tells us, gives us that we have real-time happenings in the Supreme Court, and any such miscarriage of justice will not go by default. And I dare say, if anybody gives an opportunity, but I have my own reservations. Bilkis Bano case, I take the strongest exception that her perpetrators were let out on bail. I also take a strong exception to the fact that those accused of killing Inspector Kotwali in Bulandshahr were feted and garlanded. Yes. As an ex-police officer, I have my own reservations about these, and every small clinch has to be invincible. One has to be
Sushant Sareen, this charge that the PFI is the mirror image of the RSS, and if the PFI has been banned, action should be taken against the RSS, the RJD, the Congress, the AIMIM, all towing that same line. To what extent is it even fair to compare the PFI with the RSS?
Rahul, I
Or
think
the
it's a
Bajrang Dal.
travesty to compare the two organizations. But having said that, the people who are demanding a ban on the RSS, they were in power for 10 years from 2004 to 2014. They could have banned the RSS at that point of time. They banned the RSS 3 times in the past. And what happened after that? They simply couldn't carry it. They couldn't prove their case. And these were not governments which were linked to the RSS. These were governments which were hostile to the RSS. The very same people who are demanding a ban on the RSS and are trying to do monkey balancing. What I find objectionable is this is monkey balancing. If you have adequate evidence, adequate proof against the RSS, by all means go to court and demand a ban on it. And when you were in government, you could have banned that organization. But you weren't able to do it because you had no evidence. Even in the case of PFI, Rahul, the demands for banning an organization like the PFI have been made for years. And yet it has taken a long time simply because there are certain objective criteria, certain legal requirements which you have to fulfill before you can actually go and ban an organization. You just can't do it out of a whim and a fancy. And I would imagine that having the government would have collected the necessary evidence to actually justify this ban. Number one. Number two, Rahul, on the question of what is a ban good enough? No, for an organization which has like PFI, which has the kind of resources it has, which the following it has, and which has metastasized, to a point where it's in every nook and corner of this country. It's not going to be enough. It will mutate. But what is important is that a ban does disrupt the functioning of an organization like this. Imagine if the SIMI had not been banned, what kind of an organization and what havoc it would have wreaked today.
Absolutely.
In this day and age. So I think a ban is necessary, but as Dr. Vikram Singh says, you just can't rest on a ban. You have to follow through and make sure that it does not, reappear in another avatar. And if it does, then you crack down on it before it.
You are hitting out at opposition parties. Adil Singh Boparai, Sushant Sareen asks, if there was evidence against the RSS or the Bajrang Dal, why did your government, when in power, not ban them?
Well, Mr. Kaval, the Congress party has a very principled position on this issue. We're against any form and any type of communalism. Extremism is not linked to any caste, creed or color. Extremism is something which cuts across all these barriers. And for us, majority, minority is immaterial. In fact, it's the Congress party which has been victims of this form of extremism. We've lost 2 former prime ministers. Our party and our workers have shed their blood for the unity and integrity of this country. So therefore, we don't need lessons and sermons from others about what needs to be done to hold this country together. Please look within. We have an illustrious past where we've defended this country's borders, we've defended the unity of this country with our toil, with our blood. Having said this, coming to the more principal point, the application of law has to be uniform. To say that now that you ban the PFI and hate and bigotry, prejudice will come to an end, I don't think so. Please put this question to Mr. Sareen. Will it come to an end? No. The problem today is selective action. If there is material, and I'm assuming the government must have material, they must follow the law. The long arm of law must apply across the board. And please take it to its logical conclusion. But there are multiple organizations, there are multiple ideologies, there are multiple individuals, and some of them enjoy state patronage. To say that the likes of Yati do not enjoy state patronage would perhaps be
Let Aman Lekhi respond to this charge of selective action, that while the PFI has been acted against and so have affiliated organizations, there are those like the Bajrang Dal whose members have been accused of very serious violent crimes, those charges not being looked at as seriously. Is that true?
This is a clear case of whataboutery, and that is more or less endemic in this country. The issue here is whether PFI should be banned. The question is, we have to critically analyze the circumstances which lead to this particular action. Now, instead of addressing the issue with regard to PFI, much of the response is, what about the others? Now, as far as the others are concerned, that's an issue which is extraneous to PFI, because the question before us is whether the ban on PFI is justified first. So it's clearly an ad hominem submission, which in some ways suffers from logical fallacy and skirts the real issue. And that's a big problem in this country. When confronted the problem, we don't look at the problem, we look for other issues and then confuse the entire thing, which is in fact what this entire political discussion is intended to do. That said, insofar as other organization is concerned, please see, if you look at the scheme of the Act, you don't resort to an easy banning, because the policy of the law doesn't say that it should be the first step. And if you look at the sequence of events over here, what we would identify is that insofar as the members of PFI are concerned, as I said at the outset, were individually prosecuted, because there is a provision under the Unlawful Activities Act dealing with unlawful activities and terrorist activities, that in different chapters of the Unlawful Activities Act. So over a period of time, there were several cases against individuals belonging to PFI, but there was no ban on the PFI. And the PFI has been functioning as PFI from 2006, we're in 2022, and it's replete with instances of criminal action, whether it's chopping of hands or forcible conversions or killing or communally in some way exciting the people or having links with ISIS in the recruitment scam over there. And there have also been individual convictions of PFI members. Now, with a history as replete as this, with instances as comprehensive as those I said, with proof which is in fact judicially tested, eventually, because it continues unabated, the question of banning comes. So banning is not coming as a matter of easy resort. Much of the champions of liberty, you say, okay, free speech, tolerance and all that. When it comes to other organizations, instead of addressing the issue of PFI, they say, why didn't you ban the other organization? Now, you cannot simultaneously say, don't easily ban, and then off-the-cuff response to a ban which is otherwise justified, to have a rhetorical question about why the other organizations are not banned. The question here is, are the circumstances of the other organizations as extreme as PFI? Now, that is not something, a subjective opinion. That has to be something which has to be objectively verified. Now, it is not a question of idle comment. It should be something of an empirical analysis.
Let Adil Singh Bopara respond to the argument.
Because all the votaries.
Look at the number of cases now against PFI members, the severity of those charges, many of them murder and terror, and therefore don't compare it with the odd member of an organization like the Bajrang Dal, because that doesn't seem to be institutional, that is more individual. Here it's happening way too frequently for it to be just dismissed as individual action.
Mr. Kanwal, this is a political debate. Mr. Lekhi and I are not arguing before the High Court vis-a-vis this case. We are on a political debate. And an unlawful association in terms of section 21P talks about any association which constitutes an infraction under 153A and 153B of the IPC. Now, what is 153A and B of the IPC? Statements, imputations, acts or actions by associations, individuals, which tend to create a religious divide, a caste divide, a regional divide. Now, please put this question to yourself. Is the PFI the only organization which is spreading and fostering religious divide in this country? Certainly not. Even Mr. Lekhi wouldn't say that. Is it Mr. Lekhi's case that banning PFI will put an end to religious divide? Certainly not. I'm sure he wouldn't say that. The Congress party is not saying don't take action against the PFI. If you have the material, take action against any organization. Let me reiterate and underline. If you have material, please take any action in accordance with law with the organization, because we have to combat this menace of extremism. It is not them and us. We are Indians. We have to combat this menace. We have to combat this extremism. And Mr. Lekhi is right. The problem indeed is what about it. When you had a BJP spokesperson making inflammatory speeches, you had the likes of Mr. Serene saying, oh, what about that fact checker? That is what about it. I think it's time in this country today where we must stand unitedly and combat this extremism.
Okay, Shoaib Alam Jamai, when you were on the show the last time, you were advocating that action should not be taken against the PFI. Now the Popular Front of India has been banned. Do you think this will lead to an end to the subversive activities that the PFI was accused to be spreading and being a part of?
Hi Rahul, and good evening to all my fellow panelists. Rahul, as far as I am concerned, I believe that the socio-political ideology of Gandhi, Nehru and specifically Maulana Azad will prevail in the Indian society or culture. not the radical kind of socio-political work which SDPI or PFI is doing till now. And I knew that it was destined to get banned because the kind of radicalization of the politics they were doing. But the thing is that, is it sufficient enough to wipe off all kind of communalism and the violence in the country? No. I'm very disappointed that even a most senior and the brilliant lawyers, even the former DGP, have some reservations in vocal against some of the nefarious Hindutva elements or the organization which were, I mean, so at the number of times were involved in riots, in the murders, in the bomb blast, in Bengal, in Kerala, but they were not being vocal against this group. So it is very disappointed to see. मैं ये चाहता हूं कि आपने बैन लगाया, सही बात है, लेकिन साथ ही साथ अगर सरकार एक दो ही ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऐसे जो रिसेंटली जिनका नाम आया कई बार इसमें धर्म परिवर्तन में, बहुत सारी चीजों में, और आपने देखा उसमें धर्म संसद में नाम आया, उन सब इनमें से किसी एक का आप बैन लगा देते तो कम से कम एक विश्वास, एक बिलीव जग जाता कि हाँ सरकार जो है वो पक्षपात नहीं कर रही है, बायस्ड नहीं है। लेकिन आपने ऐसा किया नहीं, क्योंकि आपको वोट बैंक की पड़ी है। आपको पता चला कि अगर हिंदुत्व के किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को आपने बैन लगा देंगे तो वोट बैंक पे असर पड़ जाएगा, लोग विद्रोह कर देंगे। लेकिन आप एक वोट बैंक को खुश करने के लिए, तुष्टीकरण के लिए आप जो कर रहे हैं वो मुझे लगता है ठीक नहीं है। इससे तो आप और उसको मजबूती दे रहे हैं।
Sushant Sareen, how do you respond to this charge that because that's where the BJP's vote bank lies, when there is an allegation against a member linked to a right-wing organization, linked to the idea of Hindutva, that isn't pursued because that could potentially impact or jeopardize the BJP's vote bank?
Rahul, a couple of things. I think Mr. Boparai has taken a liking for me and constantly naming me in everything I've said. But let me just take off just very shortly. Number one, you know, all this talk about Article 50, I'm not a lawyer, but I think he was quoting Article 153 and something else. And he mentioned casteism in that. If that is the principle on the basis of which you are going to start banning organization, I don't think you would have a government in Bihar or in Tamil Nadu or in many of the other states where openly, hatred against particular communities is excited. So I don't know what Mr. Boparai is talking about, and it's rather rich coming from him and his party to talk about, all this kind of sacrifices they've made. After all, let's not forget who was responsible for the disaster in Punjab and many of the other disasters and all the riots over which the Congress party presided over for decades, virtually every year. Every year they used to have a pogrom. So let's stop it out there. On the other question which Mr. Shoaib is raising, look, the point is that if, as Aman Lekhi is saying, if there is a proven evidence against a particular organization that it is involved in this kind of activity, by all means ban it. Who am I to stop it? That's a decision which governments have to take. I'm not supposed to take that. But if you're talking about, एक minute, either you speak or I'll speak.
Okay, Shoaib Jamai, you did this the last time as well. Virtually nobody spoke when you were speaking. Everybody heard you patiently, even if they didn't agree with you. Surely you must extend Sushant Sareen the same courtesy.
So Rahul, the thing is that, I don't believe in monkey balancing. Now, on the basis of that, some people from a particular organization have indulged in violence. They might have, so have people from the AIMIM, so have people from many of the other organizations who indulge in violence. Now, I'm not a advocate of violence in politics, and I believe that the state must come down with like a ton of bricks on anybody who takes the law in his own hand. Whether it's AIMIM, whether it's BJP, whether it's Congress, anybody. As far as I'm concerned, there's a way of doing politics. But you have to distinguish between violence which happens, by political organizations or political outfits, and distasteful as it might be, and violence by an organization like the PFI with known links with terror organizations, with known incidents of violence and of terrorism, and of instigating people to do violence. So if you are going to completely equate everything and draw some kind of an equivalence between parties which you don't like or you don't identify with, then I think you are making a mistake.
Dr. Jamai, it is a fact that members of the AIMIM also have been involved in certain violent activities or unlawful speeches. So it's not about what the odd member does, it's what's happening institutionally that matters more.
Exactly, Rahul. See, calling a spade is not a monkey balancing. आपके अंदर गट्स होनी चाहिए. मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि सबको पता है कि बजरंग दल हो, वीएचपी हो या आरएसएस हो, ये सारे मेंबर्स बीजेपी को वोट देते हैं और इनको जिताने के लिए जी जान लगा देते हैं. अब इन्हीं के वोट के बुनियाद पर सरकार बनी है और इन्वेस्टिगेशन एजेंसी को जो निर्देश देंगे, जो इंस्ट्रक्ट करेंगे जांच करने की इन संगठनों की, तो वो सरकार ही करेगी. अब बीजेपी ही नहीं चाहती है कि इन सब संगठनों की जांच हो, बीएचपी बजरंग दल की, तो उसका डॉजियर कैसे तैयार होगा? उसका कोई डॉजियर तैयार होगा नहीं, रिपोर्ट तैयार होगी नहीं, तो उसको बैन करने की बात नहीं आएगी. सवाल ये हो रहा है कि इससे पहले जो एनआईए ने जब यहां से मालेगांव बम ब्लास्ट का जब मामला हुआ था, और जब हेमंत करकरे साहब ने और एनआईए ने जो डॉजियर तैयार किया था, आप तो उसको कमजोर कर दिए. आपने उसको कमजोर करके यहां से कोर्ट में यहां से मामले को कमजोर कर दिया. तो आप खुद टेरर के मामले को विड्रॉ करने के लिए, अपने संगठन के लोगों को बचाने के लिए एनआईए जैसे इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग एजेंसी के यहां से डॉजियर को, रिपोर्ट को आपने कमजोर कर दिया और यहां से कोर्ट में आप उसको हल्का प्रूव कर रहे हैं. तो सवाल ये होता है कि भाई मुंसिफ भी आप ही और कातिल भी आप ही, तो हम यहां से इंसाफ मांगने जाएं किनसे? सवाल यही है कि जब आप ही बैठे हैं उन जगह पे जहां आप उनको सपोर्ट करते हैं इन संगठनों को, तो उनको जांच कौन करेगा?
Vikram Singh, because you've got a government in power which has a certain political ideology, there have been charges where even former public prosecutors have spoken, where they told journalists that they were asked to go slow in those cases. And this has happened as a matter of record, leading to people like Dr. Jamai questioning whether action is being taken in an equal fashion against all organizations or individuals who have charges against them.
Rahul, I've heard Dr. Jamai and everybody very, very patiently, and as an Indian, I'm a little concerned. Concerned because, yes, what you have raised also is a fact on record, that at the same time, India happens to be one country which is extremely, extremely magnanimous towards the enemy of the nation. You had a book, Mumbai Hamle ke RSS ki Sajish, after the Mumbai blast, and no other than Digvijay Singh was the person who released the book immediately after the Mumbai blast. Can you ever see this miscarriage of justice ever? And there was a narrative to show that it was not the Pakistanis or the ISI, it was somebody else within the country who orchestrated this. Then you had the funeral of Yaqub Memon, whose funeral was some kind of a procession that was orchestrated by the PFI. Then the beautification of the grave of Yaqub Memon. I feel very strongly about all this. Yes, there may be a few fault lines, but they need to be addressed. I don't say one at the cost of the other, but they need to complement each other. But comparison should be between comparables. PFI is a Frankenstein, and if there are fault lines elsewhere, they need to be addressed also. But I don't say that there can be comparison between the PFI and the RSS. Look at the criminal history and the recoveries that has been made from the PFI. 250 crores in one go, explosive, the do-it-yourself kits in respect of IEDs, the weapons, and also the currencies, and also the flow of money. Of course, you cannot blame that it is because of the RSS that this happened. It is a first-class recovery from the scene of incident and the raid itself, and the PFI had better put its act together to explain before the tribunal the costs.
Now what is critical is that the action against the PFI be such that it leads to an end to these subversive activities, and that the evidence holds up in a court of law. That is most important for the time being. Karuna Nandi, Aman Lekhi, Dr. Shoaib Alam Jamai, Sushant Sareen, Dr. Vikram Singh and Adil Singh Boparai for joining me on the News Track. Thank you very much.